The Israeli government has already described Palestinian people as human animals, which means they do that to justify extreme violence and to justify the ethnic cleansing which is taking place. They want to take them away from their land and to expel them into the desert. The big story or the big issue of 2023 going into 2024 is the issue of Palestine. What we're witnessing is the mass murder of innocent people, and it's happening in real time. It's happening on TV. We're all seeing it. We're seeing them being blown to bits every single day. The Israeli government has already described Palestinian people as human animals, which means they do that to justify extreme violence and to justify the ethnic cleansing which is taking place even as we speak. If they don't murder all of them, if they don't succeed in massacring all of the Palestinian people, their plan is to push them into the Sinai desert. They want to take them away from their land and to expel them into the desert. That's what Israel's great strategy is. That is ethnic cleansing. And they are doing it with the support of the bloodthirsty, brutal American government. It's hard to sympathize with Israelis, when you think about all of these things. They have to do the right thing and give back the land. They have to stop brutalizing Palestinian people. They have to ensure that they have full rights for them to experience a peaceful existence. Until they do that, there will always be war against the people of Israel because of the suffering that they have inflicted on the innocent people of Palestine. And even as I speak to you now, the United Nations has failed to pass a resolution to call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. And that tells you the weakness of the United Nations, number one. Number two, it also tells you the moral depravity and the moral corruption of America and the West for standing by while innocent people are being slaughtered every single day. So I think the story of Palestine will continue to be a big story even in 2024, and it will continue to define who is on the right side of history and who is on the wrong side of history. I suppose you could say the world is divided. I think there is definitely more division now than there was previously. A lot of that has to do with geopolitics. It has to do with America's role in geopolitics, in sowing divisions, in America's role in neo-colonization. South Africa, for example, this year held the BRICS conference, which many Western powers did not support. In fact, there was a very clear and concerted effort to disrupt the BRICS conference, to make sure that BRICS does not focus on its agenda, and to ensure that the conference does not go off successfully. Thankfully, they failed in their attempts. But what is more obvious is the divisions amongst us. It's very clear that there's a clear separation between the global north and the global south, and that our ideals are very different. And if you look at what's happening in Palestine, for example, the suffering of the Palestinian people, the bombing campaign led by Israel, supported by America and other Western powers, the fact that none of them have the moral fortitude or none of them have taken a correct stand on the mass murder of innocent Palestinians shows you just how separate we are. Progressive countries like South Africa, countries in the global south have been very clear about how they view Palestine, how they view the conflict, how they view Israel's role in the mass murder of innocents in Palestine. But America and other Western powers continue to support Israel. They continue to support Israel in its bombardment and the weapons that they've been given to continue to inflict suffering on the Palestinian people. So yes, I think the world now is more divided than it's ever been before. And that's because it's very clear where the global south is and where our values and where we stand on issues of human rights, on issues of colonization. And it's very clear where the West is on those issues. And I think going forward, I think we are going to continue to be even more divided than we currently are. I must also say that South Africa is going to have national elections in 2024 also. So it is a big year. It's a big election year for many parts of the world. And it really depends on the outcome of the elections. It's difficult to say whether it will make us more divided or more united. I think the only thing that will define that will be the actions that are taken after those elections. It'll be defined by who takes power after those elections. In America, the battle is between Joe Biden of the Democrats against Donald Trump, who is Republican. There are those who say a presidency under Donald Trump will mean more divisions. I don't know. If you're asking members of or people from the African continent whether things will improve or worsen, we might say that they'll be the same. Because the policies that America has had towards Africa have been policies of imperialism, colonialism, and that hasn't changed regardless of whether the president was a Democrat or a Republican. So I think that's going to be a very interesting year next year to see what comes out of that election. In South Africa, it's a big year because the current governing party, the African National Congress, is doing very, very badly. They've lost a lot of support. The polls, there are suggestions that they might only win through a coalition. We don't know. There's also the rise of political parties like the Economic Freedom Fighters. The EFF is a party that some have described as a radical left party. If they do well in the elections next year, it does mean that there will be a significant shift in policies in South Africa. And it also means that even the way that South Africa engages with certain countries, that might also change. So it really does depend how these elections work out next year. We'll probably know better once those elections have taken place. No, that is absolute rubbish, and I would definitely disagree. And by the way, the New York Times is not a publication that I take very seriously. They are a mouthpiece of imperialism. They have justified the brutality and the suffering of people from the global south for decades. They have condemned Cuba, for example. They condemn the state of Venezuela. We don't take them seriously. NUMSA certainly doesn't take them seriously, especially if you look at how they attacked some of the progressives in India who right now are victims of the Modi regime. The attacks of October 7th, it was definitely a provocation. The Palestinians have been provoked for more than 70 years, and they have resisted. They have actually embarked on peaceful resistance. And when they embark on peaceful resistance, they are shot at, they are killed, their children are detained without trial for decades. Land is stolen. Israel sends settlers into their land, armed to the teeth with massive guns, to violate the daily existence of Palestinian people. They violate the human rights of Palestinian people, and they've been doing that for more than 70 years. When Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, it was because they had reached a point where they had no choice but to defend themselves. If you look at it from the perspective of what South Africa went through during apartheid, there was a point during the battle against apartheid when even South Africans took up armed struggle and armed resistance. When there was a time when there was a bombing campaign led by members of Umkhonto weSizwe, which is an armed wing of the ANC, innocent people died in that bombing campaign. But that was because we were responding to extreme levels of brutality and violence from a racist apartheid state. You cannot see those things in isolation. The people of Palestine are doing the exact same thing. For decades, they have resisted peacefully, and their peaceful resistance has been responded to with extreme violence. At some point, peaceful resistance will transform into armed aggression. That is only natural. That is the natural order of things. And if Israel wants peace, then Israel needs to stop being the aggressor. Then Israel needs to return the stolen land. And Israel needs to ensure that Palestinian people are able to live peacefully with full human rights and full democratic and political rights and full control of the land on which they were born. Until that day comes, unfortunately, Israel and Israelis can never be peace. There can never be peace for them if there is no peace in Palestine. So it is true that the world focus is very much on Palestine. And I think it's important that we should focus on Palestine. But we should also focus on other parts of the African continent where we're seeing a lot of suffering, where we're seeing a lot of exploitation, where we're seeing Western powers exerting their power onto the local population. Definitely, the conflict in Sudan is one that's of serious worry. That's a big area of concern. Also, if you look at what's happening in the DRC, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, there's a lot of problems there as well. In fact, people are talking about how there's a lot of suffering, particularly for ordinary communities in the DRC because of this new form of colonialism and colonialist expansion that's happening in that part of the world, where that country is really being exploited for its mineral wealth for the benefit of France. Palestinians have been suffering for 75 years, or if not more, all along. In fact, the week before October 7th, nobody cared about how they were suffering. Nobody cared about their land dispossession. It was only when Hamas launched this very strong offensive against Israel in the manner that it did, by kidnapping hostages and killing some of them, unfortunately. And I think we need to be very clear about the fact that even if that incident happened, we cannot blame Hamas. We must not allow Hamas to take full responsibility for that situation. If Israel was not stealing land from Palestinians, if Israel had not been brutalizing Palestinian people for more than 7 decades, there wouldn't be a need for Hamas. Hamas, for example, only came into existence sometime in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. All of these years, since 1948, the Palestinians have been suffering. So we cannot even blame Hamas for what's happening in Israel. Israel must take full responsibility, not only for the deaths of Palestinians, but even for the deaths of Israeli people. They are the ones who created this level of suffering that resulted in a Hamas or a freedom movement being formed in response to the suffering. How that ends, I think, will also have an impact on geopolitics going into the future. And I think it's definitely a story that needs to be carefully watched. I wouldn't say, so for me personally, I wouldn't say there's an individual who's a figure. I would say the most memorable group of people for 2023 are the Palestinians. They have shown so much bravery, they've shown so much courage, they've shown so much resolve. I don't know how they continue to have faith in this concept of freedom for themselves as a people after all that they have suffered. And I would definitely say that the most memorable group of people of 2023 are the Palestinians.